Hi guys, I'm Sam and welcome back to my channel, which is known as the Unity of Life. And today we're going to be looking at feeding, and we're going to do a little mini series on feeding. So we're going to start off with how you can look after and feed your own dog or cat. And then we're going to look into exotic animals as well as zoo animals, and how you go about feeding them when they're in the zoo. So what we're going to start off with today is something known as a feeding plan, and we're going to look at why you need a feeding plan before we move on to different types of diets that you can be putting your pets onto. So let's have a look at why it is you need a feeding plan. So what is the aim behind this? Well, feeding an animal is important, obviously. You don't want them to starve to death. It's the same as you eat food. If you don't get food, you're going to die as well. So obviously it's important because it maintains life and development, and it gives you the energy that you need. And it's important to keep the animal's diet as close as to what they would eat in the wild, because if an animal's stomach has evolved to eat certain things, usually raw meat or plant material, or when we say close to what it is in the wild, that's more to do with animals actually in zoos than domesticated animals, because obviously domesticated animals, they've evolved a lot from their ancestors in the wild so that they can eat things that maybe their ancestors can't. But the basis is still very similar, with it being raw meat or plant materials. Animals can stomach cooked meats, but if you cook them, if you are going to feed the meat and you do cook meat for them to eat, then you're destroying all the enzymes and the bacteria that's obviously will cause you an upset stomach, but doesn't necessarily cause your pet to have an upset stomach. So this is usually, like I said, it is usually different to what we feed our pets. There are so many different brands of food out there that contain a whole lot of different stuff, and they claim to be good for your animals, and that it's all been approved by vets, and it's all really cheap. But how good is it really? So there's normally 3 ways in which animals feed. So you can choose to feed your animal dry food. You can give them fresh food, which can also be frozen into a corn, especially in the summer months, because it just turns into like a cat or dog ice lolly, and it keeps them cool and occupied as well. It gets those brain function working. Or you can even give them a combination of dry and wet food. And obviously you can give them fresh meat and stuff, which is usually raw. So depending on the species of the animal, you may give them live food. So we're looking at more reptiles, so things like bearded dragons, and feeding them crickets, invertebrates. Like I said, there is a huge debate going on whether or not an invertebrate has feelings, if they can feel pain. I did do a little bit of work on this in my undergraduate. It was overcomplicated because it was neuroscience, and suffice to say I did not do so very well in that module, but it got really complicated, and it was just a little bit frustrating. But the gist of it was that animals, they do have some invertebrates, they do have some sort of neurons that are similar to nervous systems. Some of the nerves are similar to mammals, so if the mammal can feel pain, then why couldn't an invertebrate like cricket not be able to feel pain? And we can't feed live vertebrate animals to other animals in the UK, in the zoos and things like that, so it's a bit weird that it's alright for you to feed a live invertebrate to your pet bearded dragon, for example, or your gecko. So your animal needs to keep a constant weight. That weight has got to be a healthy weight. It cannot be too skinny and it cannot be obese. Unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of pets suffer from obesity. And this is just climbing, and it's because people love their pets too much, and that is also just as cruel as not loving them enough. Especially when you're feeding them and they can't walk. Like I saw I don't even know what kind of spaniel it was, but it was a spaniel when I was working in a kennel, and he was that fat he couldn't walk through the door because he was so wide, and the fat on his back was like sliding off of his butt, and it was like hiding his tail. It was absolutely disgusting and quite sad to see because he could barely walk because he was that heavy. So the whole point of a feeding plan, it helps you to keep your pet in this constant weight, and it helps them also stay healthy because there's a lot of things you need to consider, which we're going to go through. And if you stick to a feeding plan, you're not going to stray and feed them stuff that's maybe bad for them. So the food you give an animal is no good if it is high in fat. It may result in making the animal overweight, obviously. And obese animals, like I've said already, a common thing, and we see it every day now, which is really sad. And lots of pets are attending slimming classes with veterinary nurses. Some veterinary practices, the nurses will put on like Slimming World for dogs and cats, and it's become such a problem that the health of the animal is at risk. So you obviously know yourself, if you eat and you become really obese, your doctor's going to tell you that you need to lose weight because it's going to cause you a lot of health problems. It is exactly the same for your pet. So keep that in mind next time you're feeding them some really high in fat and sugary treats. So sometimes the health of the animal is so bad it needs intervention or like an operation, but it can't have it because it's too overweight. So vets are a little bit like doctors. They won't operate if you're overweight or if your animal's overweight, because they brings a risk factor in with the anaesthetic. And so something we don't want. We want our pets to come out on the other side, and we certainly want our loved ones to come out of the other side as well and not die in the operating theatre. So the same thing goes, like I said, it goes for you. However, sometimes you've got the other thing where you're trying to lose weight and your pet ends up being underweight. So it's really hard to know what is a healthy weight for your pet, and there's a lot of research out there because it all depends on the breed of your dog as well, because obviously some breeds are bigger, so they're going to generally be heavier than your littler breeds, but they're all still in healthy ranges. So like we said, you do need to think about the breed of the animal when you're feeding it. So like you've got an Irish Wolfhound and a Chihuahua, you're going to feed the Wolfhound much more food that's higher in nutrients than what you're going to feed your Chihuahua. And you might feed your Wolfhound a lot more often during the day than what you're going to feed your Chihuahua, even though the Chihuahua is going to think that's not fair. But it's for its own good. And this is down to the fact that you need to feed the Chihuahua the same amount of the same food you would the Wolfhound. The poor little dog would be sick of you overfed it, because the stomach is smaller than an Irish Wolfhound, because obviously it's a very small breed. And if you fed your Irish Wolfhound the same amount that you do your Chihuahua, he or she's going to become severely underweight really quickly, and become emaciated because they're not getting enough food. So one other thing we need to consider, as well as the breed, is the age and the species. Is it a cat? Is it a dog? Is it a hamster? Is it a rabbit? Is it a reptile? What kind of animal have I got and how old is it? So it's important to know what species your animal is and what it eats naturally. Because if you've got a pet rabbit, they're going to eat quite a lot of things that they would eat normally in the wilds. I mean, I know you can get pellets and stuff, but be careful with pellets, and make sure that you know what should be in these pellets, and just make sure that on the back you read the ingredients and they are getting all the nutrition that they do need. Okay, so all animals have individual needs because they are all very different, just like we are, and you'll find that you have more than one animal of the same species. You may not be able to feed them the same food. That happens quite a lot of the time. A lot of dogs, I've noticed these days, need to be in a gluten-free diet because it upsets their stomach, and then they'll have another dog that's exactly the same breed and he's fine with wheat and barley in his food and he's not that sensitive, but sometimes it is easier to feed them the same food, just so you don't have one dog accidentally eating the other dog's food and it becoming ill from that. And like it's the same for animals of different species as well. So for example, you have birds which will eat seeds and worms depending on the species of bird, and then you've got mammals who will eat meat and veg, or both, or one or the other. And you've got reptiles that they will eat fruit or they'll eat insects. And the age of the animal has a huge impact on what you feed them as well, because a young animal needs a lot of protein and nutrients to help the animal develop its bones naturally. And young animals may be fed a similar diet to an old animal. So for example, a foal, so a baby horse, is given a medium-sized cup of sugar beet, a medium-sized scoop of chaff, conditioned cubes, well, half of that, a teaspoon of garlic and 2 pumps of oil. Right, okay, I know what I'm talking about here. This was back in like 2016 and I'm referring to a foal called Loki who had a friend who was a yearling at the time called Dumbledore, so that was a crazy crossover. So we had Loki, we had his mum Whisper, and we had Whisper's mum, so Loki's grandmother, Serenade. And Serenade, she got sugar beet, chaff, conditioner cubes, garlic and 2 pumps of oil and 1 pump of cider vinegar and a joint supplement and turmeric, because turmeric helps with any inflammation in the body, especially around the joints. So you can see how they ate similar things, even though one was really old and one was still really, really young. And I knew what they ate because they were at stables that I was working at the time. In fact, I had been with Loki since he was 2 weeks old, and I should have started my placement the day that he was born, but I didn't get any of the paperwork through, so I didn't know that I was meant to start for 2 weeks. So we also need to consider whether or not the animal is diabetic or if there's any medical problems that the animal may have or any allergies, because like I said, some animals have some horrendous allergies. For example, my dog couldn't eat pork because she came out with a rash, and Quizzy, who was also an assistance dog, she was the predecessor to Vinny, who I've mentioned before on this channel, and she couldn't eat meat, she could only eat fish. If she ate any other meat, then again she would become all itchy and scratchy and very uncomfortable. So considerations need to be given to medical conditions such as diabetes. Your animal needs to have the correct sugar level. And you know, it's the same as you and me, and you can give insulin to animals, though it's not fun. I wouldn't have thought, or easy. So anyway, another thing we have to consider is the life stage. So the life stage, obviously different parts of the life. So if you remember when we were looking at breeding, we mentioned that you're going to feed your female. Your female dog, when she's pregnant, you're going to feed her slightly different food. And then when she's given birth, you're going to feed her again. You're going to change her food a little bit, so she's getting all the nutrients she needs, because she's obviously putting a lot of work into growing the puppies inside of her and then producing milk to feed her puppies. And then when the puppies are weaned and they're young, they will need some different foods. And then when they're an adult, you'll change their food again, because they won't need as much or nutrition or in higher levels as they did when they were younger, because their development is all over and done with. And then older animals, and the closer they get to death, because some animals, when they get old, they lose their teeth, so they won't be able to eat a lot of hard solid foods, and they'll need something softer for their mouths. So with each life stage, you need to feed your animal very differently, like we said. And like we've already mentioned, it's in the third and final stages of pregnancy where you're going to feed the animal more food, because you don't want the puppies or the kittens to be getting too big with inside mum, so that she can't give birth and she has to have a cesarean. So you don't want them to get too big too fast until they're outside mum. And obviously, like I said, you need to make sure what you're giving her is good enough, is going to make up for the fact that she's losing all that energy and nutrients for producing this milk. So something else we need to really look at is the work level, because some animals do work. So when an animal is working, it's important to feed the animal the right food. It needs to get enough energy from its food to do the work it needs to do. Depending on the type of work the animal needs to do, it may require supplements to be added to the food. So generally, if they're doing a lot of food, doing a lot of work, they're going to burn off a lot of energy, they're going to burn off a lot of weight, so you might feed them a little bit more than an animal that isn't working. It all depends on the animal and the species and just the type of work as well. So the animal behaviour and condition, this is something else, because you may not be aware, but the type of food that you feed your animal can have an effect on its behaviour. This happens a lot in horses. So if you give them something that's really, really high in sugar, then they're going to be like a little kid that's just had E numbers, and they're going to be really hyperactive, and they're going to be really uncontrollable, and that can be dangerous, especially with a horse. So on the other hand, you don't want the animal to have no energy to do anything, so the food you give your animal might change and affect its mood as well. An animal may become aggressive overnight because the food it has eaten could cause problems with the animal, and it's trying to tell you that it's actually in pain. So it's not the food itself that's making it aggressive, it's just this animal hasn't got no way to say, don't touch me because it hurts. So some dogs, like I said, they have to eat sensitive foods. You get all sorts of foods that are very that are specifically for dogs that have got like sensitive guts and everything like that. So the best thing you kind of like need to do is talk to your vet or a animal nutritionist, and they can help you find the right sort of diet and the right sort of balance, and help you write up a plan if your dog does have any dietary requirements. So the quantities of food eaten, so we need to think about this as well. So the quantities of food that you give your animal must be enough to help the animal keep a healthy weight, and needs to be given at the same time each day, especially if they have sensitive stomachs, so that it doesn't make the animal ill. And I'm not gonna lie, dogs do know when they're getting their food, because Vinny, for example, he can't tell the time, he can't read the clock, but something inside of him makes him know that it is the time that he's getting fed. So he'll have his breakfast, and then at about 1 o'clock he gets some dinner in a sort of like a toy, so like a Kong or in a puzzle, so he keeps him occupied, and he has to use his brain to get it, and he can't just wolf it all down. And then he'll get his tea, and near that time, especially for his tea, because he knows it's getting closer to that time and you've not given him it, he will come up to you and he'll start pestering you, and you'll get nudged with his nose, and he's just a right pain in the backside until he gets his dinner or his tea. He will settle, but then he'll get bored and he'll start nudging you again. He's like, I want my tea. And it's like the same day every day. It's amazing that they can pick up on those things. So evaluate the effectiveness of the feeding plan. So the feeding plan, so I put 1 together, for example, and it was for a dog, and it contained raw meat and fish. This was, like I said, this was back in college, and we'll go through that in another video. And obviously that I added little different bits, like different supplements, so every now and again to stop the dog from getting bored, and it means that it's not going to stop eating its food because it's fed up with eating the same thing over and over again, which is the same for us. If we ate out of pizza every single day for our lives, we're going to get really fed up with pizza and never want to eat another pizza in our lives. So the costs of feeding against the budget. So basically what this is saying is, if you go and you buy budget cheap food, that might not necessarily be the best food for your dogs. It might not have all the nutritions that you need for your dog. It might be missing quite a lot out, or it could just have a lot of fatty foods in. I know Bakers is definitely something to stay clear of when you're feeding your animals, because it is just full of crap. There is absolutely nothing beneficial in that food for your dog, so you've got to keep that into consideration. You know, animals, they're not cheap, okay? Not at all. So just a quick sum it all up. Every animal is an individual, and so has individual needs. Dogs need a balanced diet which gives them everything they need to remain fit and active. So they need like vitamins and nourishments and fibres and proteins and minerals without causing or aggravating problems in their health or their behaviour. A dog system can tolerate meats that are going off unlike humans. It is important to conduct your research when you are making a feeding plan, or even getting an animal. Anything to do with animals, you should do your research first. Not only on the food that the particular species eats, but on the animal itself. Any changes to feeding should such as going from fresh to dry, should be done over a period of time, so you don't upset the stomach, and not all in one go. And dry food diet, a dog will require more water intake for the dog. So sometimes if they've got biscuits, sometimes it's recommend that you soak those biscuits, because the biscuits will expand. And when they're wet, and if you just feed them and they gulp it down, you and any animal, you already have fluid in your stomach, right? Especially you've been drinking, which I should hope you've been drinking plenty of fluids, and so the biscuits can expand in the stomach, and that can cause a lot of health problems. So sometimes it's better to soak them, so it's already expanded, and it expands on the outside, not on the inside of the animal, which can lead to things like a twisted gut and a very expensive vet bill. So, basically it is common sense. Think about what you're going to feed your animal. You would do the same for you. I mean, these days it's quite a popular thing for people to be fit and to be healthy and to watch what they're eating and maybe have a feeding plan. And I know veganism is quite popular these days as well. And we're going to be looking at the difference between a vegan animal and an animal that isn't vegan. We're going to talk about all that in the next video. So I hope you've learned a little bit today. If you've liked any of the content that I've shared so far and you haven't yet already subscribed, then you can click on my face down here and you can subscribe that way. Or you can just hit the subscribe button underneath the video. Hit the bell. You'll be notified every Saturday and Wednesday when I upload a video. And if you want to know any animal content, there'll be some videos down here. And don't forget if you've got any questions, then put it in the comments section and I'll try my best to answer them. And don't forget to share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.